So maybe we can now come to some big issue on apocalyptic prophecies. When talking about climate, we're talking about warming of the earth, sea level rise, etc.
Yeah.
Hurricanes, more of everything bad, in short.
Yeah. Including obesity, diabetes, ingrown toenail.
So what can be said about all this?
It's stupid, to put it bluntly. I mean, you have the UN saying we can't find any relation with hurricanes except they're mainly going down, as far as landfall hurricanes. And the alarmists say, hell with that. They're going to get worse. And you have extreme weather and you have no increase. And the UN says we can't find any increase. Doesn't matter if you're an alarmist, increase. So, there's a complete disconnect between the science, even the science of people who support the alarm, and the alarmists whose sole interest is to get the public scared. And, there was an American humorist, H.L. Mencken, he had a wonderful statement, that the urge to save humanity is almost always a false front for the urge to rule. And the urge to rule is very strong.
So, considering, for example, the sea level rise, what can be said about sea level rise?
That's a very scary subject.
It's a biblical problem.
Well, no. There was an article, it had to be in the mid-'80s, by Steve Schneider and John Holdren, who was current science advisor. And it was what kind of issue would engage the public in support of climate alarm. And they said sea level. Yes, everyone can imagine New York underwater and so on. So early in the game, the idea was sea level rise is something people can visualize. They have trouble visualizing 5 degrees increase in temperature. So it was decided sea level rise would be used. The trouble with sea level rise is it's been rising for a couple of hundred years and something on the order of 8-9 inches a century. And we know how to deal with it, and there's no sign of acceleration. And so where's the catastrophe? I don't know. But this doesn't matter. As far as the media goes, anything that is bad is due to climate. So you have now, our vice president goes down to Central America or something and says, we have an immigration problem. What are the root causes? Climate change. It's convenient for a politician. Whatever you have, blame it on climate.
But when we hear scientists already, indeed scientists say the sea level is rising. IPCC
look.
said that it would rise a lot.
No.
They are becoming more careful now, but at some
they
point...
always were relatively careful. And again, the IPCC is a complicated document, as you know. There are the 3 sections. There's the section on science, the section on impacts, and the section on mitigation. Only the first section is on science. The other 2 sections take the worst scenarios and start discussing them, but they're useless. Not totally useless. They often point out the difficulties with doing anything. But then you have the summaries, and then you have the press release. And these often give a very different impression, but sometimes they don't. We talked about it, when you say that man is responsible for most of the warming since 1950. This is a perfectly innocent statement. It's consistent with no problem at all. But the politicians and the environmentalists say, this is the smoking gun. We must do something, otherwise we're doomed. Well, the scientist didn't have to say that. He knew the politicians would say it for him. And as long as the politicians continue supporting more climate scientists, they're not, what's the mileage in complaining about what the politicians do? And the universities, they like it because, you know, first of all, fighting climate change is a form of virtue. You know, we show we're good people. We I don't know, don't wash our clothes every day. I don't know, it's something, we don't drive a car, or we assume that electricity comes from the outlet rather than a coal-fired plant. But, you know, all this pretend is satisfying to some people.
But how do you explain that? So there are not many scientists from the IPCC that said, well, I cannot endorse this, I have to go. You did that after
even I didn't.
Chris Lancy did that, some people, but not a lot of them.
No. First of all, remember, I mean, you haven't worked on the IPCC at all, have you?
No.
Okay. What do you do? You know, for instance, I was involved in AR3.
Made in
2001.
Something.
Yeah, something like that.
The third
At any
report.
rate, I was responsible with Hervé Letrut and Ray Pierre Humbert and so on for about a page and a half out of thousands. Mm-hmm. And for this, we traveled around the world 2-3 times. It was an immensely wasteful process. In fact, what we wrote was honest. I insisted that if we didn't tell the whole truth, at least we shouldn't say anything that was a lie. And the head of the section was Stocker from Switzerland, and he said, well, you can't criticize models too much. So that was a constraint. But even within that constraint, we were very clear. We didn't know how to deal with clouds and water vapor and so on. On the other hand, so, you know, you have a vested interest in 2 pages, a page and a half. There are occasional meetings at the end which are attended by relatively few participants where they say, do you approve? But there's very seldom any genuine approval of the whole thing. After the fact, they've claimed that participation meant you approve of the whole thing. That makes no sense because, as we mentioned, nobody knows all the aspects of climate. So what does it mean that I approve what the paleo people say, or I approve? And the only thing I can say is I approve the section we wrote as not being dishonest.
But few people speak out to say this.
Yeah,
that.
Right. What's the advantage in speaking out? A few do.
In general, we could consider scientists are honest people.
No, come on. Scientists are people. They're not...
quite pessimistic
they're not
about
saints.
human nature.
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing special about scientists when it comes to human nature. And moreover, most scientists, I mean, look, if we look today, who do we remember of scientists in the 19th century or the early 20th century? Very few mathematicians.
Oh, quite a lot.
There were a great many, but the truth is you couldn't name more than 10 mathematicians from the 19th century.
I'd say more.
And there were hundreds.
They were not so numerous at the time.
There were hundreds already.
Not more.
And there were better ones. Remember, higher education and such things were far more selective 100, 150 years ago. Today, you know, almost half the population goes to the university. That doesn't mean they're all as the same quality as they were in the 1920s. So, you know, it's of the scientists today, 30, 40 years from now, maybe a few dozen will be remembered. Most scientists, you know, they do work. Some of the work is important, but There's nothing saintly about it, nothing special, and in many cases, nothing brilliant.